The first time I saw the light inside that school, I told myself it had to be a janitor. At 2 in the morning, easy explanations matter more than smart ones. I was driving home from my cousin's apartment after helping him move furniture, and I took the back road because it cut 15 minutes off the trip. The old Jefferson Middle School sat just off that road behind a rusted chain-link fence, dark and empty, like it had been for years. Everyone in town knew it was closed. The district had built a new school after they found mold, bad wiring, and a structural problem in the gym. Since then, the place had just been sitting there, lower windows boarded, weeds through the blacktop. I only looked over because something bright slid past one of the second-floor windows. It wasn't flickering. It moved with purpose, like someone walking down the hall with a flashlight. I'd already passed the front entrance when I hit the brakes. I sat there on the shoulder with my engine idling, watching those dark windows. Nothing. Then the light appeared again, deeper in the building. I should have kept driving. Instead, I rolled my window down and listened. The road was dead quiet. No cars, no music, just the ticking of my engine and the faint rattle of the school's front gate in the wind. When the light came back, it stopped in one classroom window and stayed there, aimed outward, like whoever was inside had noticed me. That part bothered me all the way home. Not that someone might be trespassing. Empty buildings attract people. What bothered me was how still that light had gone the moment I stopped. The next morning, I told the story at work. One of the older drivers, Phil, heard me mention the second floor and asked which side of the building I'd seen it on. I told him. He stared at me for a second and said, "That wing's supposed to be inaccessible." His brother had worked maintenance for the town. According to him, part of that floor had buckled before the school closed. They sealed the stairwell and locked that section off. If anyone was up there, they weren't supposed to be. That should have ended it. But the next night, driving that same road home, I slowed down without meaning to. There was no light this time. What I saw was worse. A person was standing in one of the tall second-floor windows, just a dark outline behind the glass, perfectly still, too tall for a kid. The head slightly tilted, like it was already watching the road before my headlights reached it. I couldn't make out a face. I only knew the shape didn't move at all as I rolled past. I barely slept. The next evening, I called my friend Marcus and told him I wanted to check the place out. I expected him to call me an idiot. Instead, he said he'd come if we made it quick. We met a little after 10 and drove out in his truck. Up close, Jefferson looked worse than it did from the road. Bricks stained black beneath the windows, vines climbing one corner. We found a gap in the fence and crossed the lot with our flashlights off. A side door near the cafeteria had been pried open. Inside, our lights picked out peeling paint, cloudy trophy cases, and a hallway lined with dented lockers. The air smelled like wet concrete and old paper. My beam passed over a section of wall where someone had dragged fresh handprints through the dust. We checked a few classrooms. Most were stripped bare, but in one room, desks had been pushed against the far wall and a single chair sat facing the doorway. Nothing else. Just one chair positioned like somebody had been sitting there, waiting for whoever came in. Marcus said we should leave. I almost agreed. Then a white light flashed upstairs. Just once. It came through the slats above the sealed stairwell door at the end of the corridor. We both froze. There was no confusion about what we saw. It came from above us, from the same wing Phil said was closed off. Then something moved overhead. Not footsteps exactly, more like a slow drag across the floor followed by a soft bump, as if something heavy had shifted position directly over the hallway. We backed toward the exit, keeping our lights up. The sound came again. Drag. Pause. Bump. Then another flash of that light appeared through the upper frame, brighter this time, angled downward through the cracks like someone was standing at the top of the blocked stairwell, aiming it at us. Marcus ran first. I was right behind him. At the fence, Marcus grabbed my arm and pointed back at the school. There was someone in the second-floor window again. The light behind it was stronger now, enough to outline the body. It looked like a man standing stiffly with one arm hanging low by his side, but the proportions felt wrong. The neck looked too long, the shoulders too narrow. For one awful second, I thought it had something pale over its face. Then the light behind it went out. The window went black. We called the police the next morning. They said they found signs of trespassing, but no one inside. They also said the upper wing was still sealed and hadn't been accessed. When I asked how that was possible, the officer paused and suggested maybe we had seen reflected light from outside. There were no outside lights on that road. 2 months later, the school caught fire just before dawn. The town blamed faulty wiring, even though the power had supposedly been cut years earlier. By afternoon, most of the second floor had collapsed into the first. What still bothers me is what Marcus admitted after the fire. He said that night in the parking lot, when we were staring at the second floor window, he saw more than one figure. The tall one was the only one standing still. Behind it, deeper in the room where the light came from, he saw smaller shapes moving around the desks like people trying not to be noticed. I asked why he hadn't told me then. He said because the reason he ran wasn't the light. It was because just before we bolted, while I was staring at the sealed stairwell, he heard children laughing above us. Not loud, not playful, just low, scattered little laughs moving slowly from one side of the hallway to the other, as if a group of kids were standing in the dark directly over our heads, listening to us decide whether to stay. By the time the alarm company called, the building had already been empty for 9 years. I know that because my mother had taught there back when Roosevelt Elementary was still open, before the district shut it down and moved everyone across town. After that, the place just sat there behind a row of dead hedges and a cracked bus loop, windows painted over on the ground floor, playground wrapped in orange fencing that eventually tore and blew away. Nobody had a reason to be there anymore. The city used one storage room for old records at first, then stopped bothering with even that. So when my Uncle Ray got a call a little after midnight about motion alerts inside the building, he assumed it was raccoons. He worked private security and sometimes took overnight contracts for vacant properties the city hadn't figured out what to do with yet. That school was one of them. He called me because I'd been helping him with odd jobs that summer, and because I was stupid enough at 19 to think spending the night checking an empty elementary school sounded interesting. We parked in front beneath a dead streetlight that buzzed but never turned on. The school looked flattened by darkness, one long brick shape with a central office and 2 classroom wings stretching out on either side. The flagpole out front was bare. The sign with the school name had one bent metal letter hanging halfway off. Even before we went in, I remember feeling like the building had already swallowed every sound around it. There were crickets in the grass near the curb. But the moment we stepped onto school property, it was like somebody had turned the volume down on the whole night. Ray unlocked the front doors with a city key and pushed them open. The smell hit first. Old dust, damp plaster, and something sweet underneath it. Almost like paper left too long in a hot attic. Our flashlight beams swept over a faded mural in the lobby. Cartoon animals reading books beneath a painted rainbow. Part of the rainbow had peeled away, so one of the clouds looked like it was dissolving. The motion sensors were grouped by zone. The first alert had come from the kindergarten wing. The second, 8 minutes later, came from the cafeteria corridor. That made it sound human. An animal might trigger one sensor. 2 that far apart suggested movement through the building. Ray checked the panel in the office while I stood in the hallway listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices. Just the low hum of air moving somewhere it shouldn't have been, even though the HVAC had been dead for years. When he came back, he said we'd sweep the right wing first. The classrooms there still looked like classrooms, which made it worse. Tiny chairs stacked upside down on tables, bulletin boards with curled construction paper borders, a calendar frozen on October. In one room, there were handprints in old paint near the sink, little blue and green palms on the cinderblock wall. My light passed over them, and I had the weirdest feeling that those prints were higher than they should have been, like a child had reached up far above their own height to leave them there. Ray was methodical. Open door, clear corners. Check windows. Move on. He barely spoke, and when he did, it was in the same calm voice he used for everything. But I noticed he kept looking down the hallway between rooms longer than he needed to. At the end of the corridor was a set of double doors with a narrow glass panel in each. Beyond them was the cafeteria passage where the second alert had come from. The panes were dark except for the shine of our own flashlights. We reached classroom 12 before we found the first thing that didn't belong. On the teacher's desk, in the middle of a layer of dust, sat a red plastic jump rope handle. Just the handle. The rope itself had been cut off clean. No dust on top of it. No cobwebs. Nothing. It looked like somebody had placed it there that night. Ray held out a hand for silence. That was when we heard the chair move. Not in our room. Somewhere farther down the hall behind us. A short scrape of metal legs across tile, then stillness. We turned our lights at the same time. Empty corridor, open classroom doors, nothing moving. Could have settled, Ray said, but he said it too quickly. We kept going. At classroom 14, I saw movement through the little door window before Ray touched the handle. It was fast and low, like someone ducking out of sight behind the teacher's desk. I grabbed his sleeve hard enough to stop him. He looked at me, annoyed at first, until he saw my face. He opened the door anyway. The room was empty. We checked behind every cabinet, every cluster of tables, even the reading nook in the corner. Nobody. But on the whiteboard, written in what looked like fresh black marker, were 3 words that hadn't been there when we shined our lights through the glass seconds earlier. We stay quiet. Ray stared at it for a long second. Then he stepped back into the hall and looked both ways, jaw tight. "We're not alone," he said. He radioed dispatch and requested a second unit. The radio answered with a burst of static, then a voice so faint I thought I imagined it. It sounded like a child whispering directly into the speaker. Ray checked the channel, tried again, and got nothing. As we moved toward the cafeteria doors, I noticed the silence getting heavier. That's the only way I can describe it. Not normal quiet. Pressure, like the building was listening. The cafeteria passage was narrower than I remembered from when I'd been a kid. Our lights caught old lunch posters peeling from the walls and a row of hooks where kids used to hang backpacks. Halfway down, Ray stopped and angled his beam toward the floor. There were footprints in the dust, small ones, not shoe prints from a vagrant or work boots from maintenance. These were the faint outlines of children's sneakers, several overlapping paths crossing the corridor as if a group had run through recently. The dust around them was untouched. He crouched and touched one with 2 fingers. "Fresh," he muttered, then immediately seemed to regret saying it aloud. At the end of the passage, the cafeteria doors stood open. Inside, the room spread out in darkness, rows of folded tables on one side, serving counter on the other, stage at the far wall with the curtain removed years ago. My flashlight swept across the floor and landed on a single rubber ball sitting dead center under the hanging lights. It was one of those cheap red playground balls. As soon as my beam hit it, the ball rolled, not far, just enough to start moving toward us. A slow, lazy turn like somebody had nudged it. Then it stopped. I heard breathing behind me and nearly jumped out of my skin before realizing it was my own. Ray took one step into the cafeteria, and from somewhere above the serving counter came the sound of a little girl saying, very clearly, "Don't." We both froze. The voice was close, not echoing through vents or from another room. Close enough that it felt like someone standing just a few feet away had spoken into the dark. Ray backed out first. He didn't run, but all the calm had gone out of him. We retreated into the corridor, never turning our backs on that room. Halfway back to the lobby, one of the classroom doors on our left slammed shut so hard the glass rattled. Then another farther down. Door after door after door, shutting in sequence toward us from both ends of the hall. Not random, organized, like something was herding us to the center. I remember the sound more than anything. Hollow metal latches snapping, each one closer than the last. I dropped my flashlight. By the time I grabbed it, every classroom door in the wing was closed, except one, classroom 14, the same room with the writing on the board. Its door stood open 6 inches, just enough to show the darkness inside. Ray grabbed my shoulder and pulled me toward the lobby, but before we reached the corner, I looked back. There were faces in the narrow window beside the door, not pressed to the glass. Just there, pale and still in the black room beyond it. More than one, too low to be adults. I couldn't make out features, only the smooth white shapes of them turned in our direction as if they had all leaned forward together the moment I looked. We got outside and straight to the truck. Ray fumbled the keys so badly he dropped them between the seats. While he searched, I looked up at the front of the school. Every second-floor window was dark, except one. In the old library above the entrance, a warm yellow light came on, steady as a lamp. A shape crossed in front of it, small at first, then a taller one behind it, then another, one after another. Silent silhouettes moving past the glass like a line of people walking deeper into a room no one should have been able to enter. The second unit arrived 8 minutes later and found the front doors locked from the inside. Ray never took another vacant building contract after that. He wouldn't talk about Roosevelt unless he was drunk, and even then, only once. He told me the part that broke him wasn't the voices or the doors or those shapes in the classroom window. It was what dispatch said when they finally reviewed the alarm log. The motion alerts hadn't started in the kindergarten wing. They had started in the library upstairs, then moved room to room through the second floor, down the central stairwell, into the first floor hallway, and finally into the cafeteria corridor. Like something had noticed we were coming in and spent the next 12 minutes moving through the school to meet us. The first person to notice the music thought it was coming from outside. That was the only reason anyone stayed calm for as long as they did. The school sat on the edge of town behind a baseball field nobody used anymore. The kind of place you only really looked at when winter stripped the trees and made the whole property visible from the road. Millhaven High had closed after a new campus opened farther east, and the old building had been left standing because the district kept arguing with the city about demolition costs. So it just sat there, 3 stories of dark brick and long black windows, fenced off but never truly secured. Kids broke in sometimes, copper thieves too. Once in a while, somebody would spray paint a wall and the town would act surprised, like they still expected an abandoned high school to behave itself. I was there because my brother Ethan was there. He volunteered with a local church group that packed food boxes out of the community center 2 streets over, and one Friday night in November, they worked later than usual getting ready for a holiday drive. I'd gone to pick him up after my shift. The center parking lot sat directly across from the old school's athletic field, and when I pulled in, I could already see a few people standing outside the building instead of leaving. They were staring across the road. I parked and heard it as soon as I stepped out. Piano music. Faint, uneven, like somebody playing with cold fingers. Not random notes. A real melody. Slow and hesitant, drifting through the dark from the direction of the school. A few of the volunteers laughed at first. Someone said maybe a homeless guy had found an old instrument. Another person guessed it was coming from a nearby house and echoing funny in the cold air. But there were no houses close enough on that side, and after a minute it became obvious the sound was coming from inside the school itself. Ethan came over, jacket half zipped, and asked if I heard it too. I said yeah. He looked excited, the way people do when something strange is still entertaining. There were about 8 of us standing there by then, all facing the same direction as the music drifted across the field. It would play for maybe 15 seconds, stop for 5, then start again. Always the same section, always cut off in the same place. One of the older women from the church said there had been a music room on the second floor back when her daughter attended classes there. That changed the mood a little. It gave the sound a location, something specific. And once a strange thing has a room attached to it, people start imagining ways to explain it. A maintenance worker from the community center, a broad guy named Curtis who loved acting braver than he was, said he had a flashlight in his truck and was going to go check. Ethan immediately said he wanted to come. I told him no. He ignored me. A couple of the others followed too, mostly because no one wanted to be the only person left behind once a group started moving. I should have stayed in my car. I still think about that. If I had left, Ethan probably would have come with me. The fence near the baseball field had been bent down long ago. We crossed through dead grass silvered by frost and headed toward the school, the music stopping and starting the whole time. Up close, the building looked much bigger than it had from the parking lot. Long rows of windows, exterior doors chained shut, gym entrance boarded. Someone had tagged one wall with black paint, but rain had dragged most of it into vertical streaks that looked like burns. Curtis found a side entrance where the chain had slipped loose from one handle. The hallway inside swallowed our flashlight beams. Trophy cases lined one wall, their glass dusty and cracked. Lockers stood open in places like mouths. The air smelled stale and dry, but underneath it was a damp, earthy odor that didn't belong in a sealed building. The piano music had stopped by then. For a few seconds, all we heard was ourselves breathing and the scrape of our shoes on grit. Then, from above us, the melody started again. No one laughed after that. It was definitely on the second floor now, louder than before, and strangely muffled at the same time, as if there were too many walls between us and the room. Curtis said, "Okay," in this tight voice, like he'd committed to the bit and didn't know how to back out. We found the main stairwell and went up. The second floor corridor was lined with classroom doors and old college banners hanging crooked from the ceiling. The music pulled us toward the east wing, where a faded sign reading "Fine Arts" still hung above a set of double doors. One of the church volunteers, Leah, whispered that this wasn't funny anymore. Nobody answered. Curtis pushed the doors open. The music stopped. We all stood there, listening to the silence ring in our ears. The fine arts hallway was narrower, with practice rooms on one side and larger classrooms on the other. At the very end was the band room. Beside it, according to the peeling letters on the wall, was choral/piano lab. My phone had no signal. Ethan checked his. Nothing. Curtis muttered a curse and started down the hall. I stayed close to my brother, suddenly angry at myself for not forcing him to leave when I had the chance. About halfway down, we passed an open classroom with stacked music stands and torn sheet music scattered across the floor. One page slid a few inches when my light crossed it. Not because of wind. There was no breeze. It moved like something underneath had nudged it. I kept my beam on that page. And for 1 second, I thought I saw the outline of fingers withdraw beneath the neighboring stand. I said Ethan's name quietly. He was looking ahead, not at me. Everyone was focused on the piano lab door at the end of the hall. It was open. Inside, our lights found rows of broken desks, overturned chairs, and one upright piano against the far wall. Its wood was dull with age, keys yellowed, top lid closed. Nobody sat at it. Curtis walked in first, slow now, flashlight trembling just enough for me to notice. He circled the instrument, shined his beam behind it, then crouched to look under the bench. "Nothing," he said. Leah asked, almost whispering, "Then what were we hearing?" Curtis put a hand on the piano lid, like he meant to prove something. "Old building, pipes, echo, somebody messing with us." The moment he touched it, one key pressed down by itself. A single note rang out. Curtis jerked back so hard he hit the bench. 2 more keys sank slowly, one after the other, like invisible fingers were trying them. Then the same broken melody began again, playing on its own in front of us. Hesitant, careful, wrong. People backed toward the door so fast they nearly tripped over each other. Ethan grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. The piano kept playing. Then a voice joined it. Not singing exactly, humming. Low at first from somewhere else in the room, then higher, as if another voice had picked up the tune from behind us in the hall. Then another farther away, thin and breathy, carrying the melody down the corridor outside. In seconds, it sounded like multiple people were humming along from different parts of the floor. Curtis shouted for everyone to move. That broke whatever spell had held us there. We rushed into the hallway, but the sound only got worse out there. The humming was all around us now. Not loud, just close, intimate, like mouths near our ears. Leah screamed and pointed down the hall we'd come from. At first, I thought the darkness was shifting. Then I realized it was people. Shapes stood in several of the classroom doorways behind us, darker than the dark around them. Human-sized, motionless, one in each doorway we passed on the way in. I counted 4 before my brain stopped wanting to count. They had no details I could make out, just the unmistakable presence of bodies occupying those entrances where there had been nothing a minute earlier. Curtis ran for the stairwell. The rest of us followed. Something slammed a door nearby with such force the whole wing shuddered. Then another. The humming stopped all at once. In that sudden silence, I heard footsteps above us. There shouldn't have been any floor above the third, but that's where the steps sounded like they were coming from, directly overhead, moving in a slow line across the ceiling as though people were crossing a level the school did not have. We hit the stairwell and nearly fell over each other going down. The volunteers behind us were crying now, breathing in sharp, panicked bursts. Ethan almost slipped on the landing, and when I turned to grab him, I looked through the stairwell window into the second-floor hall. Someone was standing at the far end near the piano lab. A girl, maybe 16 or 17, in the shape of one at least. Long, dark hair hanging forward, white blouse or something like it. Head lowered so far I couldn't see her face. She stood completely still while everyone else crashed down the stairs around me. Then, very slowly, she raised one arm and pointed toward us. Not at me. At Ethan. I dragged him the rest of the way down without saying why. We got back to the main hall and were maybe 20 feet from the exit when the music started again. Impossibly loud this time. Not upstairs. Right beside us. The old auditorium doors on our left were closed when we came in. Now one stood cracked open. Piano notes spilled through the gap, clear and strong. No hesitation anymore. It sounded like someone was playing with confidence now. Both hands moving fast across the keys. Curtis kept yelling to ignore it and get outside, but Ethan slowed. I knew before he spoke what he was going to say. He had that distant look people get when something has reached them from somewhere you can't follow. "That's her song," he said. I asked what he meant. He was staring at the auditorium door like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. That's Claire's recital piece. Claire was his girlfriend from junior year. She died in a car accident 3 winters earlier. I told him no, it wasn't. I didn't even know if that was true. I just wanted him moving. But he pulled free of my hand and stepped toward the crack in the door. The music swelled, rich and perfect now. And for the first time, there was no question it was being played by a real person in a real room a few feet away. Ethan said her name once quietly and pushed the door wider. The stage lights were on inside, not all of them. Just enough to illuminate the grand piano on stage and the empty bench in front of it. The auditorium seats beyond were black. The air in there felt colder than outside. Even from the doorway, I could feel it touching my face. The piano was playing by itself, keys rising and falling in a blur, pedals moving down, bench empty. Then a girl's voice came from somewhere in the dark seats and said, softly, "You came back." Ethan took one step into the room. I slammed into him from the side and drove him into the wall hard enough to knock the breath out of both of us. Curtis and one of the others grabbed him while I dragged at his jacket, and together we got him through the front doors and out into the freezing night. No one stopped running until we were back across the road at the community center. When we turned around, the second-floor windows of the school were lit from within. Not brightly, just enough to show movement. Room after room after room. Dark figures passing behind the glass in silence. Some walked normally, some didn't. One looked too tall for the window. Another seemed to pause and turn toward us while everyone else kept moving. And in the center window above the main entrance, where the old choir room used to be, a pale shape stood completely still with both hands resting against the glass. Police searched the building within the hour. They found no power running to the school. No people inside, no sign that any lights had been turned on. They did find the auditorium piano, open, recently tuned, and on the music stand propped neatly under the little lamp that should not have worked. Ours was a sheet of printed music for the exact recital piece Claire used to play. Ethan never went near that side of town again. Months later, after he'd mostly stopped talking about that night, he finally told me what almost made him walk into the auditorium for good. It wasn't just the song. Right before I hit him and pulled him back, he said he saw someone sitting in the front row of the dark seats, just visible beyond the stage light. He thought it was Claire at first. Then she leaned forward into the glow, and he realized the face smiling at him wasn't hers. It was older, wider, and waiting for him to come close enough to see the rest. Everyone in my town knew the old St. Alden school was empty, but for some reason people still lowered their voices when they drove past it at night. In the daytime, it just looked abandoned. 3 brick wings, a sagging roofline over the main entrance, and tall, narrow windows that reflected the sky so harshly you couldn't see inside. The district shut it down after a burst pipe ruined half the first floor, and black mold spread through the walls before repairs ever started. They built a newer school across town, fenced this one off, and left it there to rot. But after dark, the place changed. Something about those long rows of windows made it feel less like an empty building and more like something pretending to be one. I never cared about any of that until the night my friend Noah's little sister disappeared for almost an hour inside it. We were all at Noah's house for his mother's birthday cookout, and by the time people started cleaning up, it was already late. His house backed onto the service road behind St. Alden, separated only by a drainage ditch and a stretch of overgrown grass. You could stand in his backyard and see the rear side of the school through the trees. Most kids in the neighborhood grew up daring each other to cross the ditch and touch the wall. None of us ever did it after sunset. Noah's sister Emma was 8 and liked sneaking off whenever adults were distracted. One minute she was in the yard with glow sticks tied around her wrists, spinning in circles with the younger cousins. The next minute, she was gone. At first, nobody panicked. People checked the front room, the bathroom, under beds, the garage. Noah's mom thought she was hiding because she didn't want to go home with their aunt. But after 10 minutes, Noah found the back gate standing open. On the muddy ground near the ditch were little sneaker prints heading toward the trees. I still remember how fast the entire mood changed. One second it was paper plates and half-finished jokes and somebody scraping leftover food into the trash. The next, it was adults calling Emma's name with that sharp edge in their voices that means fear has arrived, and everyone hears it at once. We crossed the ditch with our phone flashlights up. The back fence of the school had sections bent down where older kids used to slip through. Fresh weeds had been crushed flat there. On the other side, the rear lot opened up into cracked asphalt and a row of basement-level windows, all black except one. A pale yellow light was on deep inside the building. Noah said Emma was scared of the dark and would have gone toward any light she saw. That was enough for the adults to start moving. His uncle called the police while the rest of us headed for the rear entrance. One of the doors hung slightly open. The chain on it snapped and rusted through. The smell inside hit like a damp blanket. Mold, wet wood, old plaster. The beam from my phone swept over lockers furred with dust and puddles shining on warped tile. Somewhere water dripped at regular intervals. Emma's name echoed down the corridor and came back thinner every time, like the building was swallowing part of it. Noah's mother kept calling louder and louder. No answer. The yellow lights seemed to be coming from farther in. Past the old administrative offices and down the main hallway. It didn't flicker like work lights or phone screens. It looked warm and steady, like a lamp in an occupied house. That was the first thing that felt wrong enough to make me stop. Empty places are supposed to feel empty. St. Alden didn't. It felt paused. We followed the light to a junction where the hall split in two. To the left was the elementary wing. To the right, a corridor leading toward the library and assembly room. Emma's glow stick lay in the center of the floor, snapped open and leaking green liquid across the tiles. Noah's mom picked it up and started crying before she even made a sound. I could still hear the breath she took in, like her body had already decided something terrible was waiting for us deeper in. Then we heard Emma laugh. Just once. It came from upstairs. All of us looked up at the dark ceiling at the same time. The school had 2 floors, but the main stairwell door ahead of us was chained shut with a district lock still hanging from it. Noah's uncle yanked it anyway, hard enough to rattle the frame. It didn't move. Emma laughed again, closer this time, and then immediately after it, something else made a sound with her. Not another laugh. More like someone trying to copy one without understanding how it should work. Noah whispered her name. No one answered. We split up after that, which was the decision every horror story warns you about, and the kind of decision people still make when a child is missing. Noah, his uncle, and I went right toward the library side looking for another staircase. The others searched the elementary wing. I kept telling myself Emma was playing, that some squatter had lights in there, that there had to be an explanation large enough to hold everything we'd seen so far. But the deeper we went, the less the building felt damaged and abandoned, and the more it felt arranged. Classroom doors stood open at identical angles. Chairs faced inward in perfect rows, despite years of neglect. In one room, every student desk had a workbook set on top of it, all open to the same page. The page was blank. The light grew stronger near the library. At the end of the corridor stood a set of double doors with wired glass windows. Warm yellow spilled through the cracks around them and stretched across the floor toward us. Noah reached the doors first and looked through the glass. Then he stumbled back so hard he hit me. I looked in. The library was lit by 3 standing lamps placed in a neat triangle in the middle of the room. I have no idea where they came from. Their cords ran across the carpet and disappeared behind shelves, but there was no generator sound, no extension lines, nothing that made sense. Inside that circle of light sat a cluster of small wooden chairs facing inward, as if a class had just gathered for story time. Emma was sitting in one of them. Her back was to us. I knew it was her because of the pink ribbon in her hair. She was completely still. Noah slammed the door open and shouted her name. The lamps all went out at once. The darkness that rushed into that room felt physical. My phone light shook so badly in my hand, the beam bounced over overturned book carts and shelves and old reading rugs. Noah ran to the center of the room, but the chairs were empty. Emma was gone. We heard footsteps behind us, not running, slow, measured, crossing the library from the far stacks toward where we stood. But when I turned my light there, I saw nothing between the shelves except darkness too dense to read as empty. Noah's uncle yelled for Emma and got no reply. Then, from somewhere behind the children's section, Emma said very clearly, "I'm here." She didn't sound scared. That was the part that broke something in me. Children who are lost don't hide in silence and answer in calm voices from the dark. They cry. They call for parents. They want out. The voice we heard sounded patient, almost distracted, like whoever said it knew we'd come eventually. Noah took off toward the sound. I followed because I couldn't let him go alone. The beam from my phone found a narrow passage between shelves, then a reading corner, then the old librarian's desk. No Emma, but on the carpet by the desk were wet little footprints leading toward a side door marked Archive. The door stood open. Inside was a small records room with filing cabinets and boxed documents stacked along the walls. There was no window, no other exit, nowhere for a child to hide. But Emma was in there, crouched in the far corner with her arms around her knees, staring at the wall. Noah dropped beside her and grabbed her shoulders. She flinched like she was waking up. When he asked what happened, she just pointed at the wall in front of her. At first, I thought she was pointing at water damage. Then my light steadied and I saw shapes in the paint. Handprints. Dozens of them. Ear layered over each other from floor to ceiling. Small hands. Large hands. Some looked old and brown beneath peeling paint. Others looked wet and fresh. All of them pressed toward the same spot at the center of the wall, as if people on the other side had been trying to push through. Noah lifted Emma and turned to leave. That was when the knocking started. One knock from inside the wall, then another, then several more in different places, moving fast beneath the paint and plaster around us, like something was striking back from within the building itself. Emma buried her face in Noah's neck and started screaming. We ran. By the time we got back to the main hall, the rest of the family was there with 2 police officers who had come in through the rear entrance. Everyone started shouting at once. Noah's mother grabbed Emma and held onto her so hard the girl could barely breathe. One of the officers asked where she'd been, and Emma pointed back toward the library. I was with the teacher, she said. No one moved for a second. The officer asked what teacher. Emma looked over his shoulder toward the dark hallway behind us and said, the one who didn't want to leave when the school emptied. Every adult in that corridor turned to look. At the far end, near the chained stairwell, a woman was standing in the dark. At least I thought it was a woman. She had the outline of one, long skirt, narrow shoulders, hair pinned or hanging close to the head. She stood with one hand resting against the wall as if she'd been waiting politely for the conversation to finish. I couldn't see a face. I only knew she was looking at us because when one of the officers raised his flashlight, she slid backward into the dark without taking a step. They searched the entire building after that and found nothing. No power source for the lamps. No person hiding inside. No way Emma could have reached the library without passing through the halls we were already searching. The officer who took our statement said she was probably confused and wandered in before anyone noticed. He said stress can make adults mishear sounds and imagine shapes in low light. Maybe. But the next morning, Noah called me and told me Emma had woken up crying because someone kept tapping on her bedroom wall from the inside. When their mother asked what the teacher looked like, Emma said she never saw her face. She said the teacher stood in the library doorway smiling in the dark and told her she had been alone in that school for a very long time. Then she asked Emma if she wanted to stay until everyone else went home.